Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to ask everyone to take their seats, fill on in. We've got a couple here on the front row. Ask those of you in the back to come forward. All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Natalie Gardner, and I direct the Kem C Gardner Policy Institute. We are so excited to welcome you here today to the Thomas S. Monson Center. This mansion serves as an embassy for public policy leadership in our state, and we are really happy to host the discussion today. Thank you so much for being here. Also, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't wish everyone a happy Valentine's Day. It's red, right? All right, as we begin, I want to thank the terrific researchers and other staff at the Gardner Institute who helped make this Newsmaker possible. Jennifer Robinson, Nick Thuriot, Melanie Beagley, Andrea Brandley, Heidi Pryor, Colleen Larson, Laura Summers, Phil Dean, Levi Pace, Paul Springer, Ellis Ivory, and more. It takes a lot to put together the research that we've put together to host an event. I also want to thank our colleagues at the Utah System of Higher Education. Jeff Landward's here, Carrie Main's here. Let's give all of these folks a hand. We have a very important newsmaker for you today. Individual, societal, and economic success all correlate strongly with an educated populace. And yet many today question the value and contribution of higher education. Today we will dig into the data and learn from higher education leaders who have joined us today on the stage. Before we get to our esteemed panel, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Laura Summers. Laura directs the industry research here at the Gardner Institute. She's going to give us an overview of the data we have compiled on the value of education. So Laura, come join me up here if you would.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this morning. So today we're going to be talking about the value of higher education, more specifically the importance of the Utah system of higher education, which includes 8 degree-granting public colleges and universities, as well as 8 technical colleges, which offer over 400 accredited program certificates. So in terms of value, I'm just going to cover a couple of the data points, and then we'll get into our great panel and with all of our amazing experts today. But I think what the data show is what we all already intrinsically know, that on average, Utahns who secure higher education degrees earn more income, they have greater employment opportunities, and they achieve greater upward mobility. Now, I'm going to walk us through sort of 3 key points related to the value of higher education that are highlighted in our new policy brief today. This policy brief is available online, as well as we have copies available at the back of the room towards the end of the Newsmaker Breakfast today. So the first point I want to cover is really relates to the value of higher education as it pertains to personal benefits. Individuals with higher educational attainment enjoy greater incomes, they enjoy greater economic stability and quality of life. Not surprisingly, the data shows that median earnings rise with educational attainment. For example, census data show that Utahns with graduate or professional degree earn more than double the median earnings for Utah adults with a high school degree or less. And the same is true, or the opposite is true, if we look at poverty rates by educational attainment as well. These data show that the poverty rate for Utah adults with less than a high school degree is more than 3 times higher than Utah adults with a bachelor's degree or higher. And the same data show that unemployment rate for Utah adults with less than a high school degree is more than double for Utahns with a bachelor's degree or higher. So beyond these immediate personal benefits, there are positive long-term generational effects when it comes to education as well. For example, data show that Utah's students with a family member with a postgraduate degree or higher are far more likely to complete post-secondary education for themselves as well. This has a very strong positive impact on economic mobility over time. Now, there are a lot of studies that speak to the positive impact of college degrees on economic mobility and being able to progress through the economy. But this study in particular looked at the income of adult children with parents from the 1960s, 1970s generation and found that the share of individuals with family income higher than their parents was greater among those with a college degree. And you can see that the difference is almost a 10 percentage point difference between those two. Now, I like this graph the best because I think it kind of sums it all up together and just speaks how important educational attainment is, not only for the state of Utah, but for the nation as a whole. Utahns with a postgraduate degree or certificate are happier, they're healthier, and they're more confident in their future career success. These data come from a survey that was completed in Utah in 2023, but there's a myriad of other data that really speak to a lot of these points. For example, Utahns with higher education rates have better health. They report higher rates of excellent, very good, good health. They also have lower unemployment, uninsured rates. And then, of course, we know that education is an important social driver of health. The second point that we want to cover related to the value of higher education is the societal benefits that it provides. So we all know that society derives valuable benefits from an educated citizenry. Data show that individuals with more education are more involved in the community with higher rates of volunteer rates and voter participation. They're also less reliant on public assistance. They pay more in taxes, which results in a positive return and investment for the state. For example, several studies show that post-secondary degree attainment significantly reduces public assistance among Utahns. There was one study that found nearly half of graduates with bachelor's degrees that previously had used SNAP or food stamps, as the program was previously known. Once they had their bachelor degrees, they never participated in that program again. So again, you can see the positive effects that it not only has on them as an individual, but on society as a whole. It's also estimated that every $1 the state invests in public higher education returns $3 in tax revenue from increased wages of college and university graduates. And this is because those with bachelor's degree or higher are estimated to pay 1.8 to 3.4 more in taxes than high school graduates. This leads us to the last point I want to cover, and that is really the economic benefits that higher education provides. Utah's system of higher education benefits Utah's economy through job and business development, workforce development, as well as innovation. In terms of workforce, an estimated 71% of Utah State higher education system graduates received high-yield degrees in 2022. And these are degrees that map to high-wage, high-demand jobs as defined by the Department of Workforce Services. And we all know that employers are consistently reporting the need for a skilled labor force as one of their greatest needs, meaning that these degrees are really filling a critical need in our state. And then finally, we need to acknowledge that Utah's public higher education institutes are major employers in the state as well. It's estimated that the Utah system of higher education as a whole supports over 130,000 jobs and generated $11.3 billion in GDP and $22.1 billion in total output in 2023. It's also just interesting to note that education services in Utah actually have a relatively high economic multiplier, and it's one of the highest among Utah's industries, making it a really strong and great investment for the state of Utah overall, because every dollar that's invested into the education system returns at least 2 or more in terms of the public and private investments that are made there. So that was just a quick snapshot. Again, I know a lot of this data is probably known, probably understood, but we thought it would be helpful to just recap that in terms of talking about the value of higher education. And at this point, I'll turn over to Natalie, who will moderate our great panel.
Thank you so much, Laura. Now you know why I thank so many people at the beginning of this Newsmaker, because it takes a lot of human endeavor to create all of those, to do all that research, to review all of that data, to create all of those presentations, and that's a really succinct description of the value of higher education. So I hope you like that. And we have a policy brief that we'll give to each of you at the end that shares all that data. Sound good? Okay, very good. President Randall, President Cantwell, President Mortensen, President Brush, thank you for being here. We have 4 college presidents on the stage. Taylor Randall leads the University of Utah. Elizabeth Cantwell leads Utah State University. Brad Mortensen with Weber State University, the president. And Darren Brush, who leads the Davis Technical College. So let's give them a hand. Thank you for taking the time. President Randall, I'd like to start with you. You're a numbers guy by training. You lead the state's flagship university. I just want to get your general reaction to these numbers. What stands out to you?
You know, I think the first thing is you look at the impact of higher education on a variety of dimensions, and it's relatively overwhelming. I think what I've always loved about higher education is it has this remarkable transformational power in individuals. And now if I could leave the data for a second, it frankly starts with ideas. It starts with ideas in the minds and the hands of the next generation. And you give them ideas and you give them confidence. And suddenly the trade-offs in society aren't seen as trade-offs. And suddenly we see hope for the future. And that is, for me, fundamentally what motivates me in terms of higher education. Numbers are great and it bears out, but it's really the ideas and the passion underneath it that are driving all of those results that you see.
Yeah, so people and ideas. President Cantwell, you lead the Land Grant Institution, the Utah State University that has this statewide mission in every county of our state. I'd love you to just give us a sense of what the land grant mission means to people off the Wasatch Front.
So, and let me tie that into both the numbers and the report, because what we know from our long experience in every county is that along with the data that says universities are powerful economic drivers, we have the trust in every community. And that piece of being a member of the community by being a major employer, by not only educating and delivering workforce for local companies, but also really genuinely creating individuals who have ideas that start up or create new endeavors in rural areas is so much more important in a rural area than it is in an urban area. It is absolutely critical that we keep doing that. So the trust piece comes from being embedded, but what we take to that embedded sort of value proposition is how do we keep driving local economies and make sure that things like the students that we educate there at least have an opportunity to stay there. So that there's not merely jobs somewhere else. So I mean, I think that the numbers all the numbers that you reflected in this report are even more significant in the truly rural counties in Utah.
Yeah. So President Randall, you highlight people and ideas, workforce development training. President Cantwell emphasizes this reach and the economic impact in rural Utah. President Mortensen, I want you to just comment on the service mission of higher ed, because we've got a teaching mission, we've got a research mission, but as public institutions, we're involved in service. Would you reflect on that?
Yeah, thanks, Natalie. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here with all of you and with my great colleagues on the stage here. Just a little bit of context at Weber State that I find a lot of folks don't know. We were founded 135 years ago as Weber Steak Academy, just the same way BYU was founded, basically, under the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The Great Depression came, the church said we can't afford this school or Snow College or Dixie College at the time and gave us to the state. About 20 years later, the governor and the legislature passed a law and said, we can't afford these schools either, we want to give them back to the church. The people of Ogden said, we know the church doesn't want us already. So folks from Ogden led a statewide ballot initiative to overturn the will of the legislature and the governor, a bill that had already passed, funding the institutions with an increase in the beer tax. And we're still here. But we know that Ogden rose up and fought to keep an institution in their community at that point in time. So at Weber, we have this deep commitment to realize we need to reciprocate that back to Ogden and the greater region. And so like our other institutions do across the state, we have a lot of programs that reach out and serve the community. We have our Center for Community Engaged Learning, where students get out of the classroom and they work with nonprofits and other groups in the community to apply what they're learning in the classroom in a real world setting, which is a great value for students and for those community groups who need the assistance. We also have an initiative that we call the Ogden Civic Action Network, Ogden CAN, where Weber State, along with the Ogden Weber Technical College, the school district, the United Way, the city, the 2 hospitals in our community, we get together to strategize on how we can help with the education, housing, and healthcare of the people in our most low-income communities in Ogden, and really try to make sure that we're giving back to the community, because again, we wouldn't be here if the community hadn't fought for us.
Yeah, thank you for that. When I mentioned to President Randall that we were going to do a newsmaker on the value of higher education, invite him to come, he told me, I want to make sure that the technical colleges are represented, and President Brush is here, Darren Brush. Darren, the data clearly shows that technical colleges create so much value in our state. They're competency-based, they're open entry, open exit. Just give us a quick snapshot of how many students Davis Technical College serves each year, and just what would you highlight as the core contribution to our state?
Well, thank you, Natalie. And thank you, Laura, for the report. It's an important report at an important time for us, right? And thank you, Taylor, for including us. I hope I do my colleagues justice. So the technical college, Davis Tech, is located in Kaysville, and we serve about 7,000 students a year. The technical colleges, there are 8 of us. We're a combined system of higher education now, which benefits the technical colleges significantly to be at the table with our big sisters and our big brothers, the degree granting institutions. It solves so many issues for higher education in Utah. For the technical colleges that have that technical college mission, there are 8 of us. And then there are 3 degree granting institutions, including Utah State University, so that we make sure that we are making best efforts to provide technical education, cover the entire state. And as a system, or a subsystem of technical colleges, I guess, we served 35,000 students last year. The neat thing about the technical colleges that energizes me is we exist in this really fascinating nexus between workforce development and economic development. That is each one of our missions. So we only teach skills that are in demand, skills that are emerging. We only teach regionally important programs. So all of our portfolios look a little bit different because we're very community-centric. We're very focused on that business and industry that we find in our counties. And as a result, those portfolios look a little bit different. It also, I noted from a recent report that our legislature and our State Board of Higher Education commissioned, that we have the largest system of technical education, of certificate granting career and technical education in the nation. And so it makes us unique in many ways, and that's one of the ways we do. And then you asked specifically about our instructional model. So the technical colleges are competency-based. So why is that important? So we're open entry. I think you also said that, Natalie. And it even gets more involved than that. We're course-based. We're very focused on the accessibility and the learning patterns and the learning styles of our students. So if you could imagine, I used an example yesterday, we had a new employee orientation, and 2 students may walk in the same day to take our welding program. They may have entirely different schedules, they may attend different days and different times of day, and they will pick up those competencies, they will master those skills at different rates. And so they may start the same day, but they'll finish at entirely different times. And that's a lot of the value of the model of technical education. Competency-based education, you build skill to skill, you master skills. What comes with that? When you know how to do something well, your confidence builds. And we see that every day in the technical college systems. And so what the benefit, some of the benefits of a competency-based model and the confidence that comes with that is we have good retention. A student sees their success, they're hungry to have more success. That travels with them through the completion of their program and into the workplace. It also travels with them often to go on and get a degree. We're non-degree granting, we're certificate granting, and now we're credit granting. But I'm proud to say that last year our alumni, almost 300 of them earned degrees at our regional university, Weber State University. And my suspicion is that a lot of those students wouldn't have had the confidence to go to Weber State had they not first gone to Davis Tech.
Yeah. Thank you for that, President Brush. Okay, I want to now go back to President Cantwell, President Randall, and talk a little bit about research. And the data shows that 95% of the sponsored research, money that comes from out of state that helps develop new discoveries for our world, 95% of it happens at these 2 institutions in our state. And that includes Brigham Young University, 95% at our R1 institutions. We also, in our analysis, found that 83% of the state's contribution from higher ed, economic contribution from higher ed, comes from the research universities. It's because of all the money that comes in that pays for research that improves our world. So, President Randall, President Cantwell, can you just describe some of this research? Make it real to us.
So I'm gonna try and describe for both of our institutions, since I have some familiarity with what happens at the U on research, because Natalie, it's not only the research itself. The multipliers from research are astounding in an economy sense, meaning not just employment associated with research that's not associated with teaching and learning or the development of workforce is astounding, but the development of that innovation ecosystem. So on the I will just highlight 2 areas. Healthcare at the U is, I mean, if you looked at that alone, the multipliers, the economic resonance throughout the state would be even more astounding than what you describe in this report. And then on USU's side, on the sort of national security and defense side, with the Space Dynamics Lab and a great deal of other work that is funded by the Department of Defense, the multipliers in terms of what else happens with regard to new companies, new ideas turning into funded efforts is astounding. So that kind of idea generation that you referred to, Taylor, in core strength areas at each of our institutions. Of course, together we do an enormous amount for the state in community value, in policy value on land, air, and water in particular. And you've all, I think, seen and heard about a lot of that since the strike force for the Great Salt Lake. But the core skill areas that we have drive so much of our economies, even in rural areas for USU, for instance. If we have energy programs and research comes in, we execute that research in rural areas in conjunction with energy companies who operate in rural areas, and the job multiplier alone is incredibly significant. So that piece of what I call the innovation ecosystem, which really eventually encompasses the entire sort of economic cycle, starts with research programs that, I mean, and the U is prodigious. I mean, this is an institution that probably brings in close to $1 billion a year in externally funded research. We're closer to 500 million at USU. Those dollars become literally many, many, many more dollars in the state. And I don't think I can, because this is the world I come from, highlight strongly enough the value of research strength in the two R1s. And then, you know, there is research being done. We do research in partnership with, even with our technical colleges, we do research in partnership with. So that reach is across the entire state.
President Randall.
I want to walk you through a little history and then make 2 points. There's this lab that was formed at the University of Utah in the 1960s. Ivan Sutherland was hired from Harvard, David Evans from Berkeley. They came together and started to think about computer graphics. You talk to Peter Evans, David's son, and I said, what was the magic of that lab? He said, well, Dad and Ivan used to take everybody up to the cabin in the summer, and all the PhD students and grad students would camp by the stream, and they would just sit around and try to figure out how the world should evolve with respect to graphics. So what happened with that? Well, Evans and Sutherland was founded. It was a simulation for jet pilots. Pixar was founded by those students. Atari was founded by those students. Because Atari was too big at the time, the Atari founder also founded Chuck E. Cheese so he could distribute his games. Because there's a reason there was such bad pizza. He wanted you actually on the games. Silicon Graphics was founded. Jim Clark also started the first browser, Netscape, and Adobe. Now, here's the history. At the time, the Utah economy was not ready for those companies, and so all of them left. Imagine if that lab had been founded today, every one of those labs would be, every one of those companies would be in the state of Utah. The nice thing to realize is the state of Utah is now ready for that, right? We have the most diverse economy in the country, right, by sector. And if we can recreate that lab, that is what will propel and jettison this economy into the future. But my second point is that research has changed. The problems are much, much larger than they used to be. And so as Betsy and I talk, we realize that our two universities, as large as those numbers sounded, are actually relatively small compared to the competitive set that we're working with. And what we really need to do is put together a consortia in this state with state leaders and drive economic policy in industries that really, really, really matter. Because together, we can do a lot of things. And then the final point is when you start to include technical colleges and Brad regionally, and we can talk about advanced materials here really quickly in aerospace, the partnerships become absolutely perfect. So we do some of the advanced research, right? We figure out the new materials and how they're supposed to be put together. And Brad and Darren create the workforce that spawn an industry. And when you look at companies coming, you have to have all of those ingredients. If you have one, they leave. That's exactly what happened in that original story, right? We had the intellectual know-how, but we didn't have the base labor that we needed that could have come through the entire system to keep those industries here. This is a very different state now. And the power of higher education with research is it will, frankly, drive all of our institutions and drive this economy if we can put this together with state policymakers.
I would love, President Mortensen, for you to just jump in there from Weber State's perspective. It's a different mission as a regional university, but you have strong research connections, particularly to Hill Air Force Base.
Yes, thanks. Research is important at our institution too, and the other regional schools, both in terms of making sure our faculty are engaged so that they can stay on the leading edge of their field to prepare the students, and also to give undergraduate research opportunities to our students. And that happens across the board at all of our places, but we have really unique opportunity and responsibility at Weber State, where we're located with what's happening at Hill Air Force Base, to really help with the aerospace and defense contractors, the Air Force Research Lab, and others to find the solutions to the problems that they're having. Most of that deals with advanced manufacturing, composite manufacturing for high temperature applications. Our adversaries are ahead of us in this space. So it's not just about workforce development and economic opportunity, it's about our national defense. And we have our facility at the west gate of Hill Air Force Base, the Miller Advanced Research and Solutions Center. We don't pretend to have all the expertise to solve those problems, but realize we can convene the experts from our partner institutions here in the state and in industry and in the government to try to solve those problems. And it's exciting to be in that space. And there is a $90 billion contract to billion with a B to develop the next generation intercontinental ballistic missile, the Sentinel program at Hill Air Force Base. That we, again, that's huge in terms of economics, but also national defense that we love being a part of.
Yeah, thank you for that. President Brush, I want to go to a little different topic and just bring up the issue of affordability and rising costs to attend an institution of higher learning. Can you just give us a sense of the average program cost at Davis Technical College and help just inform the audience about how you view the affordability question?
I'd be glad to. If I may just take a little prerogative, just at the very end of the stream of this conversation, to Taylor and Brad's point, we exist in the technical training side of the benefits from that research, right? And they talked about advanced manufacturing, and we think about Hill Air Force Base. So we grew the very first composites materials technology program in the nation around that technology in the 50s, and it's evolved, of course. When you think about the F-35, that's basically a carbon fiber wrapped computer. And so you need technicians to maintain that. So that's where it ends up downstream and training those technicians for that entire supply chain.
Yeah, thanks for connecting that.
Yeah, so we benefit directly from that. So the affordability question, so I feel very comfortable and very proud to disclose that as a matter of public policy, we subsidize to 90% the cost of technical education delivery in the state of Utah, and that's a conscious decision. We're grateful to our lawmakers for that. That keeps technical education affordable as that entry point for so many in higher education. What does that mean? So the average cost of attendance at Davis Tech, we have a portfolio of 35 programs, some very short as less than 200 hours, to some that take up to 2 years. The average cost of attendance, tuition, fees, books, materials, all in is just under $3,000. So we are very affordable, we are very accessible, as I described previously, and that's important because not unlike our sister institutions, 75% of our students are adults, and they're working, and so that affordability is important, as well as that flexibility. Now, the other benefit that comes with that good policy in Utah that makes that system, that subsystem of technical colleges so unique, is that high school students attend tuition free in their junior and senior years, right? Mm-hmm. So they can get a running start and often complete a program, some as many as 2 programs before they even complete. And then we scholarship them that first year that they're adults in order to finish if they didn't finish.
Yeah. President Randall, I'd love you to comment as well on tuition costs and how pricing works at an institution like the University of Utah.
You know, if there's one point I would love for you to leave for today, there's a difference between our list price and the actual price that students pay. And it is enormous. For an in-state student at the University of Utah, our list price is close to $10,000. I'm using round numbers because I hate to do math in public. A freshman, on average, will pay $3,500. And then for the rest of their time there, they'll pay right around $5,000. So that's about a 50% discount off of list price. Now, where does that all come from? First of all, there's federal aid that rolls in massive amounts, and Pell Grants continue to increase. But second, our donor communities are remarkably generous. And so the basic fundamental model of financing higher education, in large part, has gone away from loans and actually comes in the form of federal aid and actually scholarship aid. Less than 50% of our students in the past few years have actually taken out loans. The average number of loans would be less than $20,000 for that 50%. So if you took the average of the group that takes out 0, it's almost under $10,000 of loans that go out, and you can't get a good used car for that anymore. And then on the other side, the multiplier in terms of salaries is enormous. Our starting salaries are close to $65,000, which puts you at the 67th percentile of individual income in the United States. And so it pays for it relatively quickly. I've got a number of our placement folks here. We've made massive investments in student placement so that regardless of the major you come out in, right, we're hoping that you get a massive lift in terms of your career when you leave the institution. I would just comment on the system as a whole. It has to be probably the best deal and the best value in higher education in the country. And I would guess you could not find data that would go against that. Maybe there are a couple data points, but our system as a whole does a really good job. And I think part of our issue right now, to be blunt, is we're caught up in a national narrative that is not consistent with that data. And what it does is it scares people away from our doors. And what I'd just like to say today is, come on in, let's figure out the finances with you, because it'll pay off. And the numbers on average are really driving that home.
Yeah, President Cantwell, and as you, I mean, President Cantwell, has experience at MIT, Berkeley, Arizona State University, University of Chicago. I mean, she knows this landscape really well.
Well, let's just say the privates are nothing like the publics, and diverging.
In terms of value?
Well, I'm not. I actually don't look at their numbers because they're not as available as publics. But before I took the job that I have now, I looked at the numbers for Utah, and we are an amazing, amazing deal on the public education side. But I wanted to kind of draw that we are actually a good deal, and something you talked about, which is the changing demographic of people across their entire lifetime who want and or actually need some aspect of higher education. And when you sort of bring those two things together, we should be seeing more. I mean, we've called them adult learners, but frankly, they're people who need more education or want more education at some time other than their youth. That is the future, is whenever you need it, whenever you want it, and cost should not drive people away from coming to our institutions wherever they are and getting what they need. That is the future of work. It is really, it's the future for all of the people who are just getting a bachelor's degree today, is they will need something else and probably something else. And we're an incredibly good deal. To finish with what Taylor said, we should not be driving a message that it is too expensive to think about your life that way. You will actually enhance your ability to serve your family and your community if you think about the fact that we are available whenever you need us.
Yeah. President Mendel.
I think we've got to give Brad a second to brag on some accolades
Yes.
you've received in the last year on ROI.
Well,
So go for it.
If you're not sick of me saying it.
No, I mean, as long as you don't filibuster, I'm happy about this. That's
just,
all right.
Just a couple points on this. I mean, first of all, most of the schools in the state, with a couple of very justifiable exceptions, our tuition in the last 10 years has increased less than inflation. That is not the national narrative, but it's a fact, and we need to realize that, and that's and we need to give credit where that's due, and that's to the legislature for their support that they've and investment they've made in higher education. But the data that Taylor's referencing is Georgetown University did a study on the return on investment of 4,500 colleges and universities across the country that came out a little over a year ago now, and the headline from that was 30% of these 4,500 schools do not provide an ROI for their students because of cost or because of their completion rates or the alignment of their programs or the workforce. But if you dig into the data, and Utah institutions are not amongst that 30%, but if you dig in the data, as we did at Weber, Weber State's the only school in the state, except for a small nonprofit down the street here in Salt Lake, computer school, that's in the top 10% of those 4,500 schools for our ROI, 10 years after graduation and 40 years after graduation and every increment in between. So we're really proud of that. We feel like we've done a good job at having programs that align to workforce needs, at keeping our costs down. But the real integral piece in all of this is the work that our faculty and staff do in a very personalized way with students to give them the confidence to tap into the potential that they don't know they have. Quite honestly, we serve a lot of first-generation students at Weber State, and a lot of those students sticker price cost looks, I feel like I'm filibustering.
I'm just going to applaud. I think this is a great example, you guys. This is fabulous. It's really good. Seriously.
I'll just wrap up. Sticker price cost for first generation students or students who don't have a tradition in their family of going to higher education is a barrier. It shouldn't be a barrier at all, though. And we have programs like Dream Weber that guarantee 8 semesters of free tuition if you qualify for at least $1 of a Pell Grant. Free tuition, my folks online are going to kill me if I don't add fees and books as well. So, and we package the federal Pell Grant with private scholarships, and students don't have to pay to get a college education because it's Air Force generals, hospital administrators, financial institutions, CEOs, school district superintendents. The number one thing they all tell me is we need more. We need more people to be educated. So regardless of income, first generation, race, ethnicity, gender, any other characteristic, everybody I talk to wants more people to be educated, and we shouldn't let cost be a barrier to that access.
Thank you for that. I'm going to go to questions in just a minute, and we will have a microphone, so those of you that have questions, get them ready. President Randall, I want to come back to you because you mentioned something about the national narrative. We live in a time of institutional decline, everything from the family to media to Congress and perceptions about higher education. I guess I just want to ask you, what do you think's going on and what can be done to restore confidence in higher ed?
You know, as we've watched this overall decline in higher ed, I must say I find myself listening more and more to the critique to try to understand where it's coming from. Mm-hmm. And I think there are at least 3 hypotheses that I have. And let me quickly talk about 2 because we've already dealt with them. One is the cost, and I think we're really solid and against national narrative there. The second is that we create degrees to nowhere, and you've already heard the stats from the state. We're actually not doing that, so our state doesn't fall in there. But the third, I'm going to broadly say it's about actually inspiring young people and giving them hope for the future, and that's perhaps where we have to do more work. And it's really hope in our society in general that our institutions themselves actually can continue to deliver. I think our institution certainly is going to do over this next year a self-study to try to understand if all viewpoints and ideas that contribute to a thriving American society and an American dream are present enough on our campuses. I am enamored with this state and its entrepreneurial spirit. I'm enamored with the idea that now is the moment for universities to be entrepreneurial and innovative. Think about what giving, whether a student's going to be an entrepreneur or not, giving them an entrepreneurial student, think about what that does to inspire them in a society. Ingenuity, make mentally. We have, and that change, I believe, that confidence.
The other presidents, if they want to comment on this.
Well, I think I'll add one, because really what Taylor has said is the bottom line of the national narrative. But the other piece of that is this sort of inchoate idea of trust, that higher ed was a trusted member of the community for decades, and that trust is eroding. And we really are obliged, I think, in all of the communities we serve, not so much at this kind of high level, but literally in our communities, just to ensure that we remain trusted members of the community. And that's work. That's real work. That's not having a forum, it's actually being in the room. It involves a different division of labor on the part of presidents and others who serve the university not just our students being out in the community, but us.
Great. President Morrison?
Shortly after I was named president at Weber State, and I've been at Weber State for about 15 years before that, I watched the Blockbuster documentary. And I wake up with this thought, what keeps me up at night? It's like, I don't want to be president of Blockbuster. But as we look at some of these trends and criticisms in higher ed, and we can just think, oh, that's not us. We don't need to worry about that, and dismiss them. I think that would be a fatal mistake. And when it comes to the concerns that are out there about, are we tapping into the potential of all of our students? Are we being innovative with how we deliver curriculum and classes? And are we staying on the leading edge of the fields that we need to be teaching for the future? Skating to where the puck is going to be. I think it's a great opportunity and challenge to keep that in perspective, and the fact that there is a lot of debate and discussion about higher education and its role, both at the national and state level right now, I think emphasizes to me the importance that higher education plays and that people recognize in us, even though there can be critical voices at times. So we need to embrace that and figure out how to innovate, as has been said, and be prepared to be successful in the future, not be Blockbuster.
President Brush, bring us home on this point. Trust in
I'm the
our...
last person to do that, but I really can't add much to what my colleagues have said. We feel the impact of the criticism, the narrative of higher ed writ large. The technical colleges feel that. So I can't necessarily add anything to what these good presidents have said. I will say that the technical colleges nationally, part of the phenomenon as it affects us, and this goes back a long way, is just is the perception that technical education in higher education is something less. And one of the reasons I appreciate a consolidated system in Utah, it sends a strong message that technical education is important, right? And we see with our students now much more deliberate decision-making about their education and their career paths. How much is it going to cost? We've talked about how much time is it going to take me. But I often joke, I guess it's really not a joke, if I could sit down all the parents in Davis County and just share with them, yes, it's fine that you expect your student to be a doctor or an attorney or both in some cases, but have you considered maybe some of the other options on that path there, especially when it's free in high school?
Yeah.
Trying to elevate that part of the conversation about the value of technical education is how it affects us in large part.
Yeah, that's great. When I see the collegiality among the four of you, that helps with my trust of what's going on. This is vintage Utah, that you can take these institutions and have them complement and reinforce and bring their strengths to the table. It's really wonderful to see. Okay, let's go out to the audience. Who's got a question? Let's go right at the back here first. Line up, here comes the microphone. And if you don't mind, just giving your name and your affiliation.
Thank you. Sean Higgins with KUER. You mentioned trust. I'm curious how any and all of you feel about recent actions of the legislature, whether it's eliminating diversity, equity, inclusion programs. There's a bill introduced last week to alter core curriculum in public universities. How do those actions affect your relationship with the state, but more importantly, students' relationship with your institutions? Don't all speak at once.
I'm going to give you a permission to call on somebody on that one. No, it's.
I'll start.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in.
But I think at Weber State, when we were founded as Weber State Academy, the challenge was to be open to men and women and people of all nationalities, all religious denominations, and to be affordable so even the poorest in the land can attend. That's pretty much word for word. So 2 owners, 6 names later, we're still charged with doing that, even with the changes that the legislature is talking about. We are a public institution. We receive a lot of support from taxpayers, and the legislature represents the will of the taxpayers. And so as we we abide by the laws that they pass. But we will also always figure out a way to make sure that that same creed that was developed at Weber State 135 years ago is still open, so that we can serve all of our students, regardless of their race, ethnicity, background, and first generation status, income status, any of that. And we want to make sure that we do that in a way, like I said a second ago, where we're skating to where the puck is going to be. And so as debate happens about curriculum in particular, I think we want to be at the table and work with the State Board of Higher Education, our Board of Trustees, who have responsibility for that as well, and figure out how to make sure that we're going to produce the successful higher education graduates of the future.
That's great. Other presidents want to comment on it? President Randall.
Yeah, I've actually appreciated the dialogue that has gone on with the legislature, and unfortunately, many of you don't get to see that dialogue because it often starts with a bill, and then we are able to talk through issues. And you can pick any one of those that you just mentioned, and it's ongoing. And generally, behind that bill is a sincere desire to make sure that education is delivering on the promise to Utahns. What we heard in DEI is that we share a ton of common ground. And that common ground is that every Utahn must thrive. And the questions there were our practices actually allowing that to happen? And I think where we left the dialogue, and I am sure it will continue, is that there's common ground on we're going to make sure that our institutions continue to include everyone, and we make that happen. I think the conversation that's now starting on curriculum is, of course, a valid one, and we just simply listen. And it's one that I think started 6 or 7 months ago around, are we making sure that everyone's viewpoint is welcome on campus? And I'm an idealist fundamentally. And universities are places where ideas need to be debated. And if someone comes and critiques and says, we don't think you're allowing enough ideas to be debated, I think we ought to listen, right? I think we ought to study it. I think we ought to figure out if we've got a problem. If we do, that's one thing education can do, is learn. If we can't, we're not an educational institution. And so I've appreciated the dialogue and debate. I felt that our state leaders are very willing to listen and genuinely want this society and this state to thrive.
Great.
Natalie, could I feel obligated to add something about the resilience of our students. I actually think that they have grown up and know that decades of their lives will be a lot of this. This is the moment that we're in. Lots of different kinds of discussion. They are more resilient often than people who grew up in a less mobile environment. And so they're not all in agreement with all kinds of things, but I find that my student population is much more willing to engage, to be thoughtful, to try, really ask me, how do we discuss this on our campus, whatever bill it is? How do we talk with legislators? They are ready to be out in the conversation, and I think we need to give them a lot of credit because they know they have to live this for a long time.
That's great.
That's a good point.
Question on the front row.
My name is Jamie Renda. I want to start with, I've had a daughter graduate from the University of Utah with pre-med, had another daughter graduate from Weber State, and I currently have a son at Utah State and another son at Weber State. So,
well, we all ought to go take some classes with Darren then.
So I'm also the founder of Path Forward Utah, and we were very active in HB 261, and actually had a meeting where we invited all the university presidents to come and meet with Mr. Woodson. Been very active in outreach to minorities in the conservative cause and also in working on civil rights issues. So I just want to address the point there. I really appreciated your answer to that because in that legislation, I worked really hard to make sure we didn't defund any of the resources given to students in need, because that's important. But these programs have become divisive and free speech has become stifled. So I also appreciate your comment on that, because I think that's where the distrust has began, is our free speech in our society, but specifically in the universities. One thing I would like to challenge is I would like to see more debates on issues, not just among politicians, but actually debates so we can have the free speech and have those hard conversations to find the solutions we need. So I guess that's the question I'm posing to you. Can we see more debates in our higher education?
That's great. Yeah, let's get the presidents to respond to that. The notion of using the university as a forum for ideas, marketplace.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really the ideal model when it comes to free speech. Is if we can get two folks who represent diverse viewpoints, or multiple folks who represent diverse viewpoints, and sit on a stage like this and in a civil way have an in-depth discussion about their points of view and why those differ. And if we can model that on our colleges and university campuses, I really have hope that's the way that we can turn down the temperature a little bit in our broad.
And I just completely disagree with Brad. I just think that's no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
So, but yeah, I think that's really the model we need to aspire towards and include. I mean, it's great to have individual speakers from a variety of viewpoints, or classes on different viewpoints, but if we can model that and bring it together, it's a great opportunity.
I want to speak on behalf of the introverts, and we have many of them on our college campuses, because we also need programs, and I'm just going to speak to the one that we just introduced at USU in a talk between Irsad Manji and Governor Cox around moral courage, which is really targeted at how do you as an individual. So there are many students and faculty who would have a hard time reflecting disagreement on stage in front of a bunch of people, no matter how much you train them. But as individuals, they know they have to do that. So I think it's also incumbent on us to demonstrate the platform of higher ed in terms of many viewpoints by mentoring our entire community to do that as individuals.
Thank you for that. And then President Randall, then we'll do one more question.
Yeah, and what as you dig down, and I completely agree with my colleagues, despite the fact I'd love to have a debate right now. I think there's a skill in speaking with each other that we've got to hone. First of all, you got to teach people to have the courage to speak their mind. And second, when they speak it, I think you also have to let them recognize or have them recognize that once you speak your opinion, you actually have then the obligation to ask for somebody else's opinion and to actually listen to it. And then when you disagree, I think, and this is perhaps the hardest part, is you have to have the patience. You have the patience to understand. And try to see where they're coming from. And sometimes that patience has to last a long time. As Scott Fitzgerald said, the sign of a higher intelligence is the ability to keep two contrary ideas in your mind at the same time and still function well. And I think we're just in a moment in society where there's a lot of competing ideas, and if we want to hold civility and our institutions and our civilization and democracy in a good spot, we got to be patient with each other, and that's as big a skill as listening.
Let's go to Hope Eccles for our last question. She's right here. There you go.
Thank you. I'm going to head back to something much more mundane. When we talk about affordability, it concerns me that we talk about that in a vacuum. Because to me, affordability without completion is nothing. The most expensive degree anyone will get, or excuse me, the most expensive education they'll get is the one without completion. So, and that to me is the core of what our institutions of higher education need to do. So how can we, I think we need to link those two more as we're discussing. I spend some time, I appreciate what Brad says about that the cost is free for the first year for a lot of the students. We can give them back their money. We can never give them back their time. So for me, that focus on completion. So I don't know if there's a question in there, but ways that we can keep linking that together would be good.
One way to just respond to that, and just because I'm running out of time here, but I'd love each of the presidents, in full disclosure, to share their completion rates. And I know Mr. President Brush, 72%?
Right now, we're tracking at about 84.
84?
Our headwind, frankly, is a good economy. When you're teaching students in the skills that are in demand, they often get latched, they're grabbed sooner than they complete. And the challenge, so the message that I try to convey to our students is, our average student age is 26 years old. They haven't experienced a down economy. They don't know what it's like not to have all these job offers. And so what I try to communicate is that credential is so important for your long-term resilience in the workforce, right? Which they don't quite realize yet. But
yeah, as our data show.
And by the way, that figure north of 80% is true of all the technical colleges.
That's great. President Mortensen, President Cantwell.
Weber State, we just got our numbers from our most recent 6-year full-time, first-time completion rate. The standard that the Department of Education does, it's 46%. That's up from 31% 5 years ago. So we are trying to make strides on that, but we want to be higher. We want to be a lot higher.
President Cantwell.
Recalling that we have tech ed, and we are in tech ed regions where the minute the economy upticks, everybody is employed, and they are no longer in their tech ed. Our overall rate is somewhere north of 55%. We obviously need to improve that. But I really want to speak, I know we're short on time, but on behalf of the idea that the way that we measure completion is an abomination, because what it does is it lets every student who doesn't complete in 4 years because they went on a mission, because they had a baby, whatever it is, it lets them know that they're a failure. And I think that's a terrible message for the world today. So our completion rates have been tied very closely to our economic value. You pay more the longer you go. I really want to see us disaggregate that narrative, so that we are all going back to our students who had 3 years of college and never came back, never finished, and saying, you can do this, we can help you with the cost. But they should never have felt like they can't do that to begin with.
Yeah. Real quickly, President Randall.
Our graduation rates fluctuate between 65 and 67%. Our biggest headwind is year one. We lose half our people after year one.
Yeah.
And so a lot to address there.
That's great. Okay, thanks everybody for your patience. I do have one more question for him, but it's really quick. It's just sort of a tradition here to have a little phrase or word that summarizes it. So I'm going to start with President Brush and move this way. President Brush, you're on an elevator. You got a student, a parent, a business leader, an elected official in that elevator.
I get off on the next floor.
Remember, the elevator's only a 10-second ride or something. What message would you share?
It's in our slogan. We change lives. We believe that.
We change lives. President Mortensen.
You have more potential than you realize.
Yeah. President Cantwell.
We're here to serve you.
Okay. And President Randall.
The future is bright.
Very good. Thanks, everybody. Wonderful conversation. I want to remind everyone that we have this policy brief at the back. I also, if you are a youth student or faculty, we'd love you to tap in downstairs. We love our engagement with you. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of the day.
It's so helpful.
Good job.
Always good to see.
Sorry, my hands are frozen, but yeah.